everybody, welcome back to the Essential Guide to Digital Jewelry Design. I'm doing this video today from a sweltering hot Paris, and what we're going to do is a pearl earring. I'm just going to ray trace mode here so we can have a look at what we've got. And we're going to be using a very easy, straightforward way to build a pair of kind of Baroque style earrings in Rhino 8. So let's get started. And I'm going to go back to shaded view. I'm going to put everything off in these layers, and we're going to start from scratch. So I'll see we have separate elements, and the dimensions we'll have a look at when we build everything. So the one thing I'm going to move is my pearl, and I'm starting with a pearl that has a diameter, and let's just put our O-snaps on here, with a diameter of 8 millimeters. I just moved that down from the center. In fact, let's just delete that and let's just create that pearl again from scratch. So you see, in case you are completely new to Rhino, and the center of our sphere, we will make that 0. And there where we have diameter, radius, orientation, circumference, you can use circumference if you prefer. I like diameter. I have my final size, and there we go. We have our finished pearl. I'm just going to move that pearl down a bit. That position will still change, but because I tend to build everything from the center out, my pearl is obviously going to be sitting lower than the earring. So the next thing we're going to build, and we're going to go back into our create layer here, and we're going to make a layer called curves. And I'm going to change the color of my curves to red. So in my curves, I'm going to create a sphere, and this sphere, no wait, we're going to make it a square. So we're going to go with a square. We're going to make it from the center. Going to use 0 as our center point, and our corner and lengths, we're just going to put in 5 by 5, and there you got it. We've got a square in the center, and what we're going to do next with that square is we are going to explode that square, and we are going to look at what we have once we've exploded the square, which is 4 separate sides. Going to select all those sides, and we are going to rebuild those curves with a degree of 3, and we're going to make it 5 points each. So now if we look at our curve again, just zoom in here, you'll see without the gumball that we have 5 points along our curve. So put that gumball back on, and you can see if I do that, we have a degree 3 curve. So the question is, why exactly am I doing that? Well, the reason I'm doing that is, and you'll see in a moment, so that I can create a new shape, and that was just a 45-degree rotation on the gumball. And that new shape is going to look a bit like a flower. So let's select the outside points, and let's just lock our pearl so we don't select it, and we're going to pull those points inwards. Now at this point this looks a bit like a clover. What I was actually working towards something that looks a bit more like a flower, less like a clover. So we're just going to select those outside points and we're going to pull those outwards. Now we have what looks like a little 4-petal flower, and from here we select all those curves and we are going to join them again. So we have one single curve. We still have the points accessible though, in the event that we want to make changes, which we probably will. So you see now, it's very simple to change this shape symmetrically into something new. For example, here you have a butterfly. It's nice to start with base shapes like squares and circles and rebuild them with new points and use the symmetry of those objects to create new shapes. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I want to create a fleur-de-lis, and the fleur-de-lis I'm going to do in my front viewport, and you'll see why we will create that fleur-de-lis in a second. So first things first, following through from our shell tutorial, it's going to be a bit of a similar shape. I'm going to start just with my polylines, and in my front viewport switch on grid snap, and fleur-de-lis is quite a simple shape, but we're going to break it down into an even simpler shape by just drawing straight polylines. And again, same treatment, just explode those lines, and again we are going to rebuild that, this time with only 4 points and a degree 3. And now I can change the shape of my curve. I'm going to take the grid snap off. Can bring that down a bit. And select the 1 point. Could potentially make this 5 points along the curve here and bring that out. That looks better. And with this one, it's just you could move that point up. So you could also perhaps just there, that's good. Okay, now why are we only drawing half of this curve? Well, because this curve is going to become a rail profile, a profile curve, not a rail, a profile curve for a rail revolve. This curve isn't quite finished yet. In fact, these points are maybe too far in, but we'll see that in a moment. I first just want to do the rail revolve so you can see what kind of result you get with curves like this. And I'm just going to create one more layer. I'll call that surfaces, and put that in the right place. Change it to green. Select it. So in our rail revolve command, we are going to select our profile curve. We are going to select our rail curve. We're going to check that our record history is on. And now in your top view, you're going to type in 0 as your center. And in your front viewport, you're just going to, or your side viewport, you're just going to bring a axis straight up and see what we get with the result. Okay, so one of the reasons you see from the top viewport it doesn't make any sense is because this little curve down here is not is not potentially ideal for the profile curve. So let's just bring those points out. There we go. That's looking better. Okay, a bit too much. Second thing we're going to do is we're going to rotate that by 45, and you know, it's looking perfect. And we can bring those in again. Okay, and that's looking quite nice. You can play a bit with that. For example, or you can change the profile curve a bit if you want to make it a little bit of a longer object, and bring those points out a bit and up a bit. But that's a very solid object, and that looks good. So at this point I'm just going to have a look at what the dimensions of our object are here, and it's about a centimeter. That's good. If you ever want to know how big something is going to be when it's finished, what helps is to zoom 1:1 on your screen. It gives you immediately a good indication of how small your object is for real, because when you work in large scale like that, or when you work zoomed in like that, you tend to lose a perspective on how small the objects you make can be. What also works is to print your objects out scale 1:1. So that will be the top of our earring. Finally, we could even make it a bit bigger. Let's just see how it looks with the bottom part. And now we're going to take these same curves and just lift them up in case we need them. And we're going to duplicate them using the gumball tool and Alt. Just use the arrow and turn it all around. We're going to rotate this 180 degrees, but because our gumball is not in the center, we won't have it in the center. So what we're going to do is just going to select the profile curve, and I'm going to go to our rotation tool. I'm just going to use 0 as my center point, and I'm going to rotate like that. And as you can see, it's already very close to our pearl, so let's just move that top piece up again, and I'm going to move that up, and I want to make that quite a bit bigger. So we're going to relocate our gumball. Just click on the little white button or the little white circle, choose relocate, left click, and we're going to scale that. We need to scale that too big. And at the bottom here, I want it to be round, like that. Move our pearl down. Let's switch it off, just lock it. And we're going to do the same thing as we did before. I'm just going to go to rail revolve. So right click and choose our profile curve and our rail curve. Go to the top viewport, put in 0, and then draw the axis in your front or right view in one direction. And here you go, 2 beautiful shapes. So the one at the bottom here is maybe a little bit too long for my taste, so I'm just going to draw that in, and I'm going to move that curve out. Okay, I like that shape. So the following. I'm going to connect these two with a little stone in a bezel setting. And to do this, I'm going to use my Grasshopper Gold app, and we are going to use a stone about, let's have a look, we need at least 2 centimeters in diameter, so 2.2, and create. It still sees the stone from the other pair of earrings, so I'm just going to put that, I'm going to explode that block and put it into another layer. So I'm going to put it in the so I'm just going to hide that stone, and we are going to bring this stone up to the middle, just between the top and the bottom, and give it a turn, 90 degrees. This is facing forward, and we could possibly scale that up a bit, or let's have a look. We don't want that piece in the middle to become too big, so actually we keep the stone small, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the top down, and once we've done the bevel set, we can see how much further we need to move. So in the jewelry settings, you have a bevel creator, a bezel setting creator for the gems. I got to select my gem, and here you've got lots of nifty settings. I just want to bring my setting down a bit. My bottom depth can remain fairly deep because I want quite a big setting in between, not too big but big enough that the meat from both sides meet. The frame width is 1.2 millimeters, that's great. Distance of the stone, just about everything is about right. That's good. And here you can also just set the angles, the arches. You might want to put a bit of an arch in here. I'm going to create the bevel. The bezel. I'm too used to saying bevel. Move that setting forward a bit, and now we can see, yes indeed, we need to move everything down because we need to make sure that there's a good amount of material joining the top and the bottom. In the event that we want to do a 3D print of this. Then the next thing we want to do is we want to cut some of the back off here so we can put a pin on. And on the previous design, what I did was I actually created an arch curve, and I booleaned that entire extruded surface off the back. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I am going to put off my setting. Actually, let's put the setting into our surfaces. until create. I'll put the gem layer in here too, and we're just going to switch this off and that. And what I'm going to do in this case is I'm just going to select surfaces to extract, and I'm going to extract these 3. Make sure that you have copy on no, otherwise it will just make a copy. And I'm going to bridge this space, make it smooth. Let's see what's the best solution here. Finally, the first thing I did was actually quite useful. But what we can do is we can reverse the arch. So let's take the arch tool, and then in top view with snap off, we are going to duplicate the edges that are open. And just join. No, at this point I don't join anything. What we can do at this point is we can do a sweep between these 2 surfaces and do the same. That is too extreme, so what we might do here is I'm going to blend our 2 curves together. So we're going to use a quick curve blend to blend that curve and that curve together, and you see it gives you a nice blend from one side to the other, which has followed the tangent of the curve that it leaves. So I'm going to do a sweep again with these 2 top curves. Okay, so it's becoming a nice flat surface here. The only thing we're going to sit with one problem here is potentially this is going to be too much of an arch. So instead of doing a sweep with these 2 side curves, I'm going to do a sweep with the profile curves and use them as rail curves, and use the 2 side curves as profile curves. Hope that wasn't too confusing what I just said. Let's see that. Nope. And there we go. It's nicely closed up at the back there. So join that to the main piece. I'm going to finally put the pin on the back there, so it'll be nice and smooth on the ear. So what we're still missing is a little cap for our pearl and some links and a little end cap for our pearl. And what I did to finish that off was I again extracted surfaces. This time I'm putting my copy back on, because what I want here is I want these surfaces at the bottom. Bring that down. I'm going to join that, and how I'm going to close that off is by using the blend surface tool. And when you use the blend surface, I recommend you switch your chain edges off. So you have your auto chain on no. And when you use it, you should always choose the two sides that will be corresponding. So if I take this part of that curve, then when I choose the second edge, so this is the segment for my first edge, so when I choose the segment for my second edge, I'll use that part of the curve that's closest, and I get a result that looks similar to some sort of a breadfruit. Just turn that down to a tangency, and we can just leave it that size. Actually, I'll do that on the other side too. So chain edges off, select the edge closest. I'm going to show you what happens if you select the edge that's furthest. So I'm just going to press enter for the second edge. I'm selecting the edge that's furthest away and see what happens. Ah, there's a twist in the surface. You see that? So let's do that again. This time choosing the segment for the second edge, and you have no problems there. Because that was done using exactly the same settings on both sides, we can potentially join those two surfaces. Yes, indeed we can. And the surface underneath. Great, so now we've got one object. And we're going to use our gumball to just turn that 180 degrees downwards. I'm going to scale that object down, and we are going to plop it over our pearl, like that. Looks like a little flower, like little sepals on a flower. And if you're not happy with the position it's in, like here, I don't want that overlapping there, I'm just going to turn it by 45 degrees, minus 45. And here I see more of my pearl now, on the sides. Similarly, I'm just going to alt copy that downwards, turn it, again 180 degrees, and this time I'm going to use even less of it for the bottom, or at least we can scale it down. Very nice finish there. Turn that by 90 degrees. Let's go. That works. So eventually what's going to happen is when you make this, you 3D print it. I'm just going to bring this down. You print it in parts, so you'll print the top, and you'll print the middle, the bezel set, you'll print the bottom. What we should actually do is hollow out at least the bottom so it's not too heavy, and then we would print the caps, and the caps would be with a hole on one end and a pin on the other, so that you can put it through a hole in the middle of the pearl. There's all considerations you have to make in the actual manufacturing. You can have a look at that right at the end. Let's just quickly finish up the graphic part of this tutorial, and that is just to create a torus. This will be good. Snap off. This will link up two sides together, so that's 2 millimeters in diameter, and with around about a 0.5 millimeter material thickness. Link, bring that down, and we would ultimately put another link. I want the point of this to stand through, and the link that holds these two will be a touch smaller. So rotate that by 90. And if we want this to sit in there, we will have to, my zoom has gone mad, we'll have to bring that up a touch, like that. No, this can move. Okay. So there we go. This is the essence of the design. Now, I'm not going to go too much in depth into the 3D printing part or the production part, but I'm going to look at it with you. So we still have to add a pin on the back of our top half here. Pin generally tends to be 1 millimeter in diameter. Maybe that's even too much. Maybe 0.9, 0.8. Make it about 1 centimeter long, depending on how good your casting agency is. You could cast the pin with your parts, but that just depends on the accuracy of whomever you're casting with. Some guys are pretty amazing and they can cast the smallest details. So for instance, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to unlock the pearl. Let's give this a save, and we are going to we forgot a detail. We forgot a very important detail actually, because in our other piece we have this filigrane on the edges everywhere. Yes, there's a diamond missing. Shall we? Yes, let's do that. I'm going to show you how that was done. That is pretty simple. We'll just switch off our curves for a moment. Put the block back on. I'll just bring the block up here so it's with the other gem. When you work with block instances from plugins, gem plugins, is very often that your gems are being steered by one layer, and only when you explode your block instance do they become singular objects that you can do anything with. Until then, they have parameters on them that are there so that you can use other tools like prongs and settings. So that it's useful to not explode the block instances until the very last moment. So we was like, yes, filigrane. So let's add our little ball. Cool. This filigrane there, and we can change it to another green. And I'm going to make a tiny little ball on the side here using grid snap. And make that ball about 0.5. That's maybe even too big. 0.45 millimeters in diameter. That's very small. And we're going to put our O snap on. We're going to make sure that our center object snap is on. And why we're going to do that, and you'll see why, is because when I use the transform orient on curve, or array on curve, actually array along curve command, and I select the object, it wants path curve. And generally, if it's not a standard object, you want it to align on that curve with a axis point, with a pivot point. In this case, our pivot point would be the center of our sphere. the absolute center. So here I'm going to select base point before I do anything else, and I'm going to go to my sphere, and using the center object snap, which you can see here because of the little white line which appears when you're close to a seam on an object, I'm going to select the central point of our sphere, and now I'm going to select an edge. Just simply select an edge, and you can see it's only put 2 objects down. If we look at our command line, it says here items 2 and the distance. So we can change items 2 to 25 and start seeing something happen here, and that would be good, but we could make it maybe more. So let's change the items just to 26. That's already better. And there we go. And basically you can do that for all these edges. So edges like that. Now I'll change my items back to 24. Yes, 22. And you continue in that vein until you've done whichever edges that you would like to do for your filigrane. So I'm going to leave it at that. You can continue, and well, let's just fast forward. Okay, so now I've done all the edges. If you hear some funny scratching in the background, that's our dog. He's having a hard time dealing with the heat wave today. The poor guy is busy taking a place in front of the air conditioning so he can cool himself down. Before you can do any kind of bullions though, you just have to take a look that you don't have duplicate surfaces, because obviously when you are arraying along a curve that is adjacent to another curve, you'll have a beginning and an end that will inevitably have the same object. So just go ahead and delete any duplicate objects that you have. For instance, I don't know, down here perhaps there's one, actually the one that's inside that surface you don't even see, so you can get rid of it entirely. There we go. Then there's also these in the corners, for example. There won't be any double here, maybe at the end here. Yeah. Another one here. And okay, got that last one. And the same down here. Okay, so now supposing we've taken care of all that, and let's say we had to do a bullion, then it should work. Things like this aren't always so easy to bullion together because of a lot of the manifold surfaces. Maybe some of the objects are too close together or on top of each other, so it requires a little bit of work, but this one did a nice bullion. Now we were going to discuss how to hollow out this bottom section. I wouldn't hollow out the top because it's a relatively small object, and actually good to have some weight so that it can carry the pieces underneath it. So I wouldn't per se hollow the top off or hollow it out, but this piece in the middle, it definitely requires a hollowing. And one way to go about that, so let's maybe just delete those duplicate objects, and let's do a bullion here too. Around. Let's see if it works. I've got some duplicate objects I haven't deleted just yet. Let's see what it does. well, it worked quite successfully. What would be the best in this case? I'm going to go into ghosted view. I'm going to use the original shape and just scale it in. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at it might not be the right solution. What might be a better option than scaling the original surface? My keyboard has changed language, which means it's changed its entire life's purpose. What should actually be doing here is potentially a inset or offset surface towards the inside. So we're going to try that. I'm going to flip the surface inwards, and we're going to make a distance of, say, 1 or 1.1, and let's see what it gives us. Delete that, and no, that's most certainly not looking like a good solution to our problem. Okay, so indeed we're going to go back to what I did the first time around, and that is just scaling it down. And let's use the eye to see if it's approximately 1 millimeter in thickness. And where the problem is going to come in, and the reason why I was looking at the offset as an option, is that you'll see here this, let's change the color of that to something that's offset from the green really well. So you can see here that there where it comes in, it's very close to the bottom half, to this intersection here, and that's going to be problematic. So what we could, for instance, do is fillet these edges over here. Let's have a look if this fillet works. Fillet doesn't always work. You have to have just the right conditions. Let's make it 0.5. That's too little. Set it all to 0.5. That's too much. 0.1. Too little again. 0.3. Let's see what it does. I handled that fairly okay, except here where there's intersecting surfaces. We'll have to fix that. But let's just see first if that took care of the issue that we might have here. Not necessarily. I have a better idea. Okay. In cases like this, I revert to cage editing. I love cage editing. And we are going to make our Z point count pretty high. Let's make it 7. And our X and Y point count to around about 6. And the Y point count as well. Okay, now what I have here is I have the ability to choose let's maybe put these things into a different layer so I don't select them by mistake. Just put the pearl off and we do the rest with that. Do the rest to change the object layer. Put those points back on again. Now I can choose these points, but I just want those that are aligning to that particular area. We're going to bring them out. Bring them out, and then what we're going to do is we're going to bring this down. And we're going to put this on again so that we can see what we're doing here. Because it shouldn't be too far down, like there, for example. See, that's already working a lot better. That's maybe a bit too far. And I'm going to go back again to these. And I'm going to bring that up again. Okay, and scale that out even more. Okay, that's working great. Okay, can even bring it up a little bit more. Okay, so that's working. Now we've basically created the inside with which we can hollow out the interior. So if we had to use a cut plane, and cut this in half, intersect it. So we're going to bullion split this. We have two parts, right? Okay. Then let's just hide the original. Then what we can do is bullion difference the inside away. We do not want to delete the input. No. And we do the same with bottom. And now we can delete the input, and what we have left is delete the originals. What we have left is two shells, a top and a bottom, that we can cast separately. What works really well is if you put some pins or just spheres that you hollow out on, you bullion on one side and is protruding on the other, and you can do a nice laser bullion with that, or you can create a step so that it sits even more carefully within that step. So that's one way you could hollow that piece out. The only thing we did forget though was that we would have had to bullion that together. So there we go. Now coming back to the pearl, how we would prepare the pearl is something similar with pins. First of all, we're going to delete the part that's intersecting with the pearl. So delete the input. No. No. And the same with the bottom. Okay. And now we have two little caps, and what we will do with those caps, we just bullion those two bits together, and then what we'll do is we'll slowly put them on different layers so you can see. So here as well, what you could do eventually is you could literally bullion this bit out of there, and you could bullion that to that. So this is one part, and there we go. So we'll do a little exploded diagram of this. You can have a good look. Let's put that there. I can put that and I'll change the color on that, obviously. And we need one more pin, because you would need a pin for the cap and the base of the cap. And what you could do ultimately is let's create one extra surface here. So that's going to be our top. That's pink. Let's put in that together. Again, if you've got a good casting agency, they could cast that pin on for you. We've worked with some incredible guys in the past. We've got our second piece, then we've got our third piece. So let's just so call that mid. Then we have our mid bottom, and make that orange. Let's put it in there. We have a link, and then we have our bot. And change that color again to turquoise, and we are going to throw that and that in there. Okay, that's nice and colorful. Gives you a good overview of all your parts, and I'm just going to explode that. You can have a good look at how that all fits together. Way. Put the pearl away. And there you go. So I hope you all enjoyed this tutorial. The idea here is to get ideas. So this is not necessarily the way, the one and only way. You have your expertise, and the idea is to use your imagination and always speak to your suppliers about your designs, and yeah, enjoy creating. Hope you all have enjoyed that, and wishing you a good summer. Take care in the heat. And if you like our channel, please subscribe and hit the like button.